Morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is you are joining us. This is the Tulsa World Scene podcast. I'm here with my colleague Jimmy Trammell to talk about things that are coming up in the world of arts and entertainment. Um, as we're getting down to the end of the year, I know that Jimmy is working on a listing of the biggest entertainment events. And now is it's strictly in Tulsa or just or the biggest entertainment
I think we're going to
stories?
include the state because we'll include things like Reba's place opening in Atoka. So we don't want to disregard that. And there's some big news, obviously, out of Veneta. So we want to include those things as well.
Okay. All right. So are you ranking them like or are you or it's just a everything is equally important on this list?
Ideally, I would like to not rank them because you're really splitting hairs. Well, the biggest ones are obvious. The biggest entertainment stories of the year are pretty obvious. But once you get beyond the big ones, it's like trying to pick the college football playoff and make everybody happy. It's not going to happen because we all have different opinions of what's big and what isn't.
This is very true. Well, you mentioned the Reba thing, and I'm sure Killers of the Flower Moon will show up somewhere in there, and Reservation Dogs as well. And what this might be putting you a little bit on the spot, but what made the list that you think people may have forgotten that it happened this year
Mm.
in the light of everything else that's been going on? Because
Yeah,
it's been a fraught
probably
year.
you just go back to something that happened in January because it's been 11 months. I'll give you, for instance, uh, Tulsa King was more of a 2022 thing, but the final
Okay.
episode did not air until January of 2023. And granted, this is a look back at the bigger entertainment stories. So Tulsa King wrapping up is on the list. But beyond being a look back, I got a tiny bit of news about Tulsa King in that entry.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, and this will be coming out.
It'll be next Wednesday, the 13th of December.
Okay. All right. Well, speaking of big entertainment stories, on the day that we were recording this, was announced that Norman Lear had passed away at the age of 101. He was the creator or the co-creator of shows such as All in the Family and The Jeffersons, Maude, uh, dozens of others. Um, and I didn't realize until I was reading one of the obits that um, he wrote and directed a movie that I remember seeing as a youngster on TV called Cold Turkey with I think Dick Van Dyke was the star, and it was about a town deciding that they were all going to quit smoking,
Hmm.
and it was a very to my young and tender sensibilities. It was a very adult and very odd kind of comedy, but I remember bits of it real clearly. Um, and I remember watching All in the Family when it first came out. Um, were you a fan of that, or was that a little bit ahead of your time?
No, I caught some All in the Family, and it's you know amazingly still a relevant show today. If you watch the reruns of my favorite Norman Lear shows, it would be Sanford and Son. I thought Sanford and Son was fantastic.
Yeah.
I once got scolded in a letter to the editor that I didn't like Sanford and Son, and it's the opposite. I love Sanford and Son. I mean, what's better than Fred G. Sanford calling Lamont, a big dummy, and Julio's goat and everything else? Uh,
And Elizabeth, it's a big one. Yeah.
but so many great shows, and you know, if you research TV history, you saw that in a certain time of TV history, CBS had I can't pronounce rural, but they had the rural purge where they killed all the country shows, like Hee Haw and Petticoat Junction and Beverly Hillbillies and
Green Acres and
everything with the tree they killed. It was a joke. But so if you hated to see those shows go, it's hard to argue that it was for the best when the next wave that came along were all these fantastic shows by Norman Lear.
right. And not just Norman Lear. I mean, if I remember correctly, there was kind of a juggernaut on Saturday nights. It was like All in the Family, and then Mary Tyler Moore, and then the Bob Newhart show, and then the Carol Burnett show, and it was all just incredibly inventive and entertaining things. I mean, I remember some of the episodes of All in the Family that stick out to me were ones that they start out, to be humorous, and then at the end there's a shock when you realize, like somebody they get a swastika painted on their door because people got the addresses confused, and yeah, I mean, it was. But I also still remember my mother saying that if she ever felt homesick, she would watch All in the Family because her parents were of that generation and echoed those characters in surprisingly strong ways. So,
So
well,
comedy was the Trojan horse that
right.
Norman Lear used to bring social issues to light in the same way that Star Trek just kind of snuck in social issues through science fiction, and you didn't really realize it was going on at the time.
and
But
MASH with anti-war ideas. So yeah, it's all, and that was also one of the ideas behind the Twilight Zone, is that Rod Serling said that he could have a Martian say things that a contemporary a contemporary character couldn't, and so that's why that was one of the reasons behind the creation of that. So, well, what else have we got coming up this weekend?
on Friday in print, I will tell you about a retired NYPD detective who is relocated to Tulsa for the next chapter of his life. Moved to Tulsa, and as a retirement gig, he started a true crime podcast, and that podcast will include both colleagues and adversaries. He's not opposed to having the bad guys on his show. Just to recap some of the things he knows about or involved in, he mainly worked in organized crime. His first guest investigated the murders of Biggie and Tupac, the rappers.
Okay.
His second guest was a behind-the-scenes person on The Sopranos. So there's kind of an entertainment angle in this true crime podcast, and I think people may find it really interesting.
Okay. All right. What we have coming up is, let's see, we'll have a review of the new Mexican-inspired restaurant called Noche downtown that is really worth checking out. It's got some great people involved with it. Brian Green, who was with Peacemaker and La Tertulia, and Marco Herrera, who was with et al., James Beard Award nominees. And they're doing some really interesting things with Mexican cuisine, giving it some unusual twists that are worth checking out. We'll have a review of that in Wednesday's Tulsa World. Another thing we've got coming up is a new book about Tulsa Library, written by a former colleague of yours and mine, John Woolley, that covers the years from I think it's 1992 to 2021, which was a time when libraries were having kind of reinvent themselves to be something more than repositories for books, and this book talks about how the innovations and ways of making use of technology rather than holding it off to expand what the library can do. And in a time when, people are saying libraries should be shut down and books should be banned and burned, it's good to know the things that the Tulsa Library was kind of at the forefront of a lot of the changes that are going on in that. So that'll be coming up this Sunday. Um, let's see. Is there anything else we've got coming up that you have to talk about?
Anything else is just a flat out secret we're not allowed to tell. So
Well, there is that.
that's
There
all
is that.
for me.
All right. Well, that's all for me too. We will close this down, and thank you all for taking time to spend time with us. And we wish you a good night and a pleasant tomorrow.
Behave.